Here's today's message.
Good morning, Revelry Church. How are you? Wow, one year in. We're 1 year in. Wow, that's so cool.
I wanted to do this.
Lamest.
Loud in the microphone. I'm really sorry about that.
Hey, if at any point during the message today you just feel really moved by the Holy Spirit, just feel free to be like, and that's the new amen in church. So
we're not going to have them next week, so don't bring them back.
I mean, you could bring it back. That'd be weird, but go for it, you know? Yeah, hey, maybe you're checking out church for the first time. Maybe you've never been to Revelry before. My name's Nick Carey, and this is my beautiful wife, Samantha.
Samantha. You can call me
Samantha.
Sam, please.
Yeah, call her Sammy Poo. That's what I call her. I've never called her that before. So basically, today we are celebrating the fact that we made it 1 year into launching a church.
You guys believe it's been literally a year?
It's been a year, a whole year. And so today might seem like it's about revelry. But I just want to say from the outset that it's not about revelry. Actually, the only reason we've made it a year into having a church and being a church is because ultimately at the end of the day, the only thing that we're about in this church community is the person of Jesus Christ. His death, His resurrection, the fact that there is forgiveness found in Him, the fact that there is new life found in Him, the fact that He came and showed a world who believed that God was distant and far away, that He is near, that He is close, that He is not mad at you, but that He madly loves you. And that's what this community is built around. That's what we exist to do, is talk about Jesus. It's not about me. It's not about Sam. It's not about anybody that's on team here. It's all about Jesus. And as we move forward into the years to come as a church, I want people, when they think of revelry, to not even think about revelry. I want people to literally think about Jesus when they hear our name anywhere. Like, oh yeah, that's those people who are obsessed with Jesus. I don't want people to be like, oh yeah, that's that group of Christians, or that's that church. No, I want people to literally be like, oh yeah, those people are really crazy about that Jesus guy, because it's all about Jesus. Sure, we're Christians. Yes, it's a church, but I don't want to be known for that stuff. I want to be known for the person of Jesus, His love, His grace, His goodness, all of that. So maybe you're new and you're not really familiar with the story of our church, so I'm just going to kind of consolidate it real quick for you. The year was 1994, and I was born into the world, and I'm kidding. I'm not going to do that. I'm that guy. No, last year, so rewind to like 2012, a church came to town to do college ministry called Amplify, and their college ministry exploded, did really well for a lot of years, to the point where they decided to plant a church campus here in Indiana. And myself and my wife, and you actually gave your life to Jesus at their college ministry.
Got saved, 2000.
So praise God. They planted a campus here. And then me and Sam, we were a part of that campus. We ran college ministry for a couple years for them. And then one day, they made the mistake of asking me to be a campus pastor for them. And the reason why that was a mistake was not because I'm a bad pastor or anything. It was because I just love to like lean into God's voice and hear what He's saying and kind of follow Him and what do you want to do. And so last January, literally January 1st, I'm like being really holy and spiritual and seeking God's face. And kidding, but I was praying and I was talking to Him about this year and like, what are we doing? And I really felt God very strongly say, it's time to do something new. It's time to take church in a new direction and a different way. And so I'm sitting there and I'm like, okay, God, so like 5-year plan, right? And I literally met with Jill and Brandon Stifler. If you know them, they're amazing. If you don't know them, get to know them. And I was just like, hey, here's kind of what I'm thinking. Maybe in like 5 years, something like that, we'll launch a church. We'll plan it. It'll be great. It'll be awesome. And then literally 2 days later, I go to a meeting with the lead pastor and the executive pastor of Amplify Church, and just to kind of talk about this year. And they literally just point blank asked me, they're like, so if we said you could do anything you want with Amplify Indiana, what would you do? And I was like, I think you should let me have that church, and then we become a different church. And they were like, seems legit to me. So basically, no, they did. They prayed about it. They talked with staff about it. They talked with their board of elders, board of directors at Amplify, and everybody prayed about it. And everybody had this overwhelming sense of peace from God that, like, this is what we're supposed to do, and this is what is best for Indiana, the town, and Indiana County as a whole. And so in 3 weeks' time, about 10 people put together everything necessary to launch Revelry Church the last weekend of January last year. And that's kind of the background. That's where we, started. We used to be a part of a different church. And I don't like to use language like we split from Amplify, because I'm actually really good friends with Jason Howard, who's their lead pastor. And I still hang out with him and talk with him. And
yeah, we're just super blessed by them, because they supported us just prayerfully, but financially they let us keep a lot of our cool equipment.
Yeah, they gave us hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of equipment. So it's so amazing.
They from the get-go, they wanted to set us up for success. So we're just super thankful to them for helping us out.
And so amazing. I love them. So I don't like to use this language there was a church split, because, the only kind of split that's okay is a banana split. Every other kind of split is bad. So, we didn't split. I like to say that Revelry was birthed from what God was already doing in Indiana, to take it to a new level. And so that's it. Last January, we were kind of birthed out of another church, and here we are a year later. And if we want to be completely, so first of all, this is extraordinarily organic and unplanned. Literally, Sam and I haven't talked about what we're going to talk about at all today, because I just wanted to be a real Sunday where we're together and we're just kind of talking about some wins and celebrating. And if I'm going to be completely transparent, last year was probably the most difficult year I've ever had in my entire life. Obviously, we decided to figure out how to run a church. Never done that before. It's how do you pay for light bills? Yeah, and then we were like, let's have a kid, because that's smart. And then, plus I was just going through a lot of personal stuff that, is getting worked through now. But I can sit on this stage a year later and say, even though it was the most difficult year I've ever had, it was the most, looking back, the most beneficial year of my life. And I think that Sam and I's marriage actually is stronger today than it's ever been before. And I think a lot of that is because of some of the hard time that maybe we experienced this past year. And I think that our church is stronger than it's ever been before. I think that the team that runs our church is stronger than it's ever been before. I think the staff that leads our church is stronger than it's ever been before. I think that the culture we're creating, the ability that we have to reach people, is bigger and better and stronger than it's ever been before. And I truly believe that we can all confidently live with this attitude that says that our worst days are behind us and only the best days are ahead of us. And I believe that every Sunday, every weekday, every after party, everything from here on out is only going to get better and bigger from here. And so really expectant for this coming year and what's going on. But what we want to do for a minute is we want to take a minute and we want to celebrate some of the big wins from last year, okay? Because our first year as a church, as difficult as it might have been, straight up was God at work all of the way. So you want to talk about some of those?
It was really interesting last year, too, because through all the hard stuff that we were all going through as a community and individually and our family, whatever, God every single Sunday was still doing more than we could have ever imagined. And it just shows how much God doesn't really need us to do anything. Like, he doesn't need us, but he chooses to use us in our weakness and in our, like, in our inadequacy. And there's so many times that, you know, our team and me and Nick even, that, like, we came, like, into Sunday, like, not ready, not wanting to be here, not wanting to preach, wondering, like, why did we do this? Why did we start a church? Like, can we keep doing this for, like, you know, 40 years? Like, but every single Sunday, God proved, like, this was the right decision. This is the decision that I put on your life. And as difficult as it is, it's so worth every single moment. So.
Yeah, definitely. Totally agree with that. So, you guys want to hear some amazing stats from last year? Hey, listen, I just want to say, you know, we're going to put up some numbers and stuff on the screen. Here's why we count, like, people. There's going to be several numbers that deal with people. We count people because people count, okay? It's not because this is a business. It's not because it's all for show. It's because each number that we see on the screen represents a person whose life was impacted because of this community that God has called us to plant and to build. So it's amazing. Also, there's so many people here today. Howdy.
I can't see past.
It's true. You can't see. Once you know you've been doing it for a while, you like begin to be able to see through light, and so.
Not quite there yet.
No. Yeah. But
last year seriously was like incredible, and so let's just start with the numbers here. Okay, so
we're gonna talk about first-time guests.
Yes, first-time guests. Last year we had 80 first-time guests,
which is amazing. That's something to celebrate.
As someone who's been like a first-time guest at a church, and like Amplify was the first church I'd ever gone to, and like the moment I walked in, I felt this like welcoming, like immediately like I belonged. And Holly actually shared a story, I think it was Holly that shared, about people that came in here, like their feedback, because she'll call them throughout the week and see, like, you know, we're so glad you came. We're so
clap,
saw you.
Clap loudly
for
Holly Davis.
Yes. She literally does
for
everything.
Real? Somebody fire me and hire her because she's so
everything.
good. She literally, listen to this woman. She's a psychopath. Every week, every first-time guest that we have, she personally calls them on the phone. I haven't talked to somebody on the phone since 2006. Like, I don't do that. She calls them every week and has a conversation just to let them know that, you know, we saw them. They're not just a number on paper somewhere. They're a real person who really matters. She calls them every single week. It's crazy, and it's amazing.
Yeah, just hearing the feedback from that, just people like saying, when I walked in, I just felt at home. I felt welcome. And that's like what our whole goal was as a church, is like that you don't come to church feeling burdened and feeling like you're being beat up and like everyone hates you and everyone's judging you, that you actually feel like I can like let my hair down and relax here and be myself and belong. So the fact that people are coming for the first time and experiencing that is like the greatest thing ever.
It's so good. And last week, Holly shared a story the other day. Like from last week, there was a new person who came, and when she reached out to her and talked to her, she was just saying how like amazing her experience was here, not just from you guys and the community that we have, but literally because of God's presence in the room. And she like just knew that God was here, knew that God was with her, knew that God was there that week. And she said she just wanted to tell everybody about church. And like that's really it, right? Like I want to make an impact on people's lives, and I'm hoping that 80 people had their life impacted this past year by our community and what we're doing. And just to get into like from a growth standpoint and stuff, this 80 first-time guests, these are only the people who actually took the initiative to fill out like a next steps, a new here paper that's on the seat back in front of you, like and so really there's probably more than 80 people. And a stat in church growth is that, like, if you want to grow year over year, you want to have as many first-time guests as you have in regular attendance. We have right now, like last year, our main, like, regular attendance was about 99, 100 people. We'll call it 100 because we're in church world and we always like to round up. So, we grew this year. I mean, we went from being, like, 50, 60 people when we started last year to like 120 a lot of the fall. So like we grew a lot which is amazing to see. And that means that we're reaching new people. And that's what it's all about. It's amazing. It's amazing. And then another stat, which is great, and this is probably a good picture of like how, 80 first-time guests is just what we have on paper. It's probably not accurate, because this past year I do an altar call every service, because the only reason we exist is so that way people can give their lives to Jesus. Like, people can be transformed and have an encounter with Jesus. And last year we had
87 people put their
make
faith in Jesus.
decisions for Jesus.
Okay, that needs to be way louder.
Yeah, that should be
the greatest thing.
Literally
87
Bro.
eternities changed forever.
We named the church Revelry because of the fact that Jesus said there is revelry in heaven whenever one person makes a decision for Jesus. We had 87 people make decisions to come home to their Heavenly Father. It's amazing. So good. So good. And you know what? That's only like hands that we saw and counted, because a lot of people, and some of you are in the room right now, like whenever I do that and I'm like, hey, on the count of 3, raise your hand so I can see it. You're just like sitting there and you're just like, put a finger up on your lap. And then I can't see that. So we don't actually know. And we don't know what's really happening in people's hearts anyway. But God does, and that's what's important. God knows how many children have come home. And one of the things I'm so excited about, and one of my passions for doing ministry and having a church and preaching the good news of Jesus is the fact that someday we're all going to stand in eternity, and we're going to see millions of people who are there because of the impact that we made in people's life. Like, don't think of this as just however many people are in the room. Those 87 people are going to go and impact 87 other people themselves, and it's this huge ripple effect. I can't wait to stand. There's going to be a whole stadium of people in heaven, a huge stadium filled with people that Revelry Church got to heaven. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's so amazing. That's so cool.
And it
people's eternities.
It encourages me a lot, because I know, like, I have a hard time sometimes, like, inviting people to church, or, like, feeling like I'm being weird or awkward, but, like, that's not just a number. Those are people's, like, their everyday lives changed, their families are changed forever, their job has changed forever, their eternity's changed, and that should encourage us to be like, I want to invite as many people as possible, not so we can keep putting bigger numbers on the screen, but so people are actually affected and saved and brought into the kingdom.
Right. I mean, that 87 individuals represents 87 families, right? Because now there's 87 families who can be impacted for the gospel, and 87 workplaces that can be impacted for the gospel, and 87 restaurants that people frequent whose waiters and waitresses can be impacted for the gospel. Like, it's got such a bigger reach than just 87 individuals, and it's amazing. It's amazing. And so we love it. We love it. And with that, we want to get as many people to heaven as possible, but we also want to bring heaven to earth as much as possible. And a lot of how heaven is brought to earth is through people who make a decision to give their lives to Jesus, who say, you know what, I want to get committed to following Jesus, and I want to make an impact in the world. And one of the ways that Jesus gave us to be able to do that is through baptism, which is where you basically make a public declaration and you say, hey, I'm going to do this ritual, this water baptism, so that way everybody around knows, like, Jesus has changed my life. I'm a new person. I have a new identity and a new calling and a new purpose because of Jesus. And this year we had 38 baptisms, which is amazing.
Yeah, and out of those 38 too, there's just been so many. We had one Sunday where we all went out to Tulik and did baptisms, and one person I think was scheduled to get baptized. Yeah. And then his whole family was there to just watch, and they all ended up getting baptized. And that was just so impactful. And just seeing people that, like, maybe were baptized whenever they were younger that wanted to rededicate, people that never believed in Jesus until this year that wanted to get baptized. And I know for me, baptism was such a moment that solidified, like, I really want to serve Jesus. Yep. I really want to, like, show people his grace and his love. And shameless plug, if you haven't been baptized, you should get baptized. It's great.
I love baptism so much that I was baptized 3 times. Once was an accident. So that's great. It's a story we're not going to get into right now. But, and you know what? That every baptism is so important, but it's true. Something was really special about that one at Tulick, that family, because that's so the Bible. Like this, there's a book called Acts that I'm actually going to read out of here in a little bit. And that book is about the acts of the first believers in Jesus, the apostles, the people who went out and started preaching when the church first grew. And like so many times, one person in a household gives their life to Jesus. And then everybody else in their household says, you know what, I want to follow Jesus too. And one of them will get baptized, and then they all decide to get baptized. So like for me, that was such a cool moment that like this entire family was just like, you know what, this is what's important. This is not only important for me, but it's important for our entire family, you know. And it's awesome. It's amazing. It's amazing. One of our values as a church, and you know, values, like we have a lot of values on the wall, things that we value, and we value all of those things, but there's like a couple specific values that we have, especially for like our team, people who really make Revelry Church what it is. One of those is that we want to be generous. I personally, in my own life, I radically value generosity, and I mean that. Like I want to be as generous as possible, and I want to be generous with my money. I want to be generous with my time. I want to be generous with my words. I want to be generous with my actions. I want people to look at Nick and be like, man, that dude is a generous guy. I think it's so important, and I think that generous people stand out in the world way more than stingy people do. There's actually a scripture that says the world of the generous gets larger and larger, but the world of the stingy gets smaller and smaller. And I want to be a person who's defined not by how small my circle of friends are, but by how big it is. How many people just know that they're loved when they're around me, and how many people want to be around me, and how many people I can make an impact with. So I think generosity is a great way to do that. And I've said from day one that we're going to be a generous church. And generosity is not about a actual number. It's about a heart posture. Because the person in here who's, you know, if you're homeless, you can be generous just like the person who's in here and owns a multi-million-dollar company can be generous, because it's not about a number. It's about your heart. It's about being willing to give because of how good you know God has been towards you. And so I want to actually share with us how generous you guys were in 2019. Does anybody want to hear how generous you guys were in 2019? This blew me away. Our first year as a church, we brought in over $127,000 for the kingdom. Just so amazing. My favorite thing is like when we do giving, like we've said, can't see past the first row, but the first row is always littered with college students. And I love watching college students who are so poor just put in some money in the bucket because that's the heart of generosity. It's not about how much. It's just about the willingness to give. And $127,000 in our first year, I was expecting like maybe we'll get like 90 grand, and that would be sweet, like $30 at least, you know, like I know I'm going to give a tithe, so that'll be in there, but you know, like I don't know how much to expect it. And the fact that we did this in our first year is absolutely incredible. And here's the other thing too. People love to know what they're giving towards, okay? So some of those numbers that we just talked about, the fact that 87 people have their eternities changed, that's your return on your investment. Because of your generosity, 87 people are no longer headed to hell, but they're headed to paradise. They're headed to eternity with Jesus. That's amazing. That's amazing. That's amazing. But, you know, so what we're going to do is this week, we didn't get it prepared yet, but this week we're going to post on our website. You're going to be able to go on there if you want, and you can actually look at our financial statement from 2019 and kind of see like how we are using the money that you guys are giving, so that way you know that it doesn't all go to Nick Carey's shoe fund. Like, you know, you can see like where it's going, what we're kind of trying to value. Like, for example, I do believe that the tithe, I don't think it's a rule. I don't think that you have to tithe as a Christian, but I believe it's a spiritual principle that when you say, here, God, take 10% of what you've given me, that he blesses that. And so for us as a church, like, I want to practice that principle of the tithe as a church, and so we are giving away 10% of all of that this year. We want to bless Chevy Chase community. We want to bless some other churches in this area, and we might even bless some individuals that we think could really use it. Just because I believe, as a church, we are going to be blessed to be a blessing. I think as individuals, God blesses us when he knows that we'll be a blessing. I think that for us as a church, we want to be blessed to be a blessing. In no formal way whatsoever, because I love them, but I'm in secret competition with the Summit Church in their level of generosity, because, like, actually one of our intern, Josh Rupika, I was going to say, if he's not here today, he's going to get it. Anyway, he works at Jimmy John's, and at church, listen to this. I love the Summit Church. They are amazing. They ordered food, okay, at church, like right now. I just called Jimmy John's, order a sub. And they did this across 4 services. They gave away, how much was your tip, Josh? Like $250 or something like that? $250? Yeah, so they literally bought a sub as a church, and then they tipped Josh Rupika $250. Like, you don't think that makes an impact? Like, that's amazing. That's awesome. I want to get there as a church someday.
And that's the thing with, these numbers, even we said earlier, like, we want all these to grow. Like, specifically, we want this number to grow not just so we can have more cool stuff and more cool lights. That's not the purpose. We want to be able to pay people that put in hours upon hours
Holy
more than, unholy, and other people.
Brandon.
Yes. Nick and Bellish. Me, maybe. No, that's fine. But we want to be able to bless those people because they put in so much work for our church, and just they care so much about this community, and you don't even see. It's emotional because you don't even see half of what they're doing throughout the week, meeting with people and putting in so much of their talent and efforts. And we want to also be able to, like, bless our community and, like, not just be a church that has a Sunday service and doesn't, like, actually do the gospel out in the world and actually reach people and do missions and, pay for people's electric bills and do these things. Like, we want to be able to do that, and we want to be able to just pour out into Indiana County. And we can't do that if we don't have money. That's a real thing. We can't do that. And so we want this to grow, not for the sake of having a lot of money, but being able to actually bless people.
Yeah, just show people that we care, I would love to, like, it'd be sweet to build a building for IUP. Wouldn't that be amazing? Like, be like, here, IUP, have this building. Like, I don't know. That would just, stuff like that would be cool. But, yeah, so this is an amazing number, and thank you for your generosity this year, for real. You guys are great. Give yourselves a giant round of applause. If God's been good in your life. Okay, anyway. So now that's last year in a picture snapshot, some of the things that we've done. This year, I want to see double first-time guests. This year, I want to see double, triple, quadruple the amount of salvations, which isn't possible if we only have double first-time guests, but you get what I'm saying. I want to see more baptisms. I want to see more money given. I want to see us just go. I love this idea in the New Testament is this constant picture of, like, Paul's always talking about Christianity is about going to something. It's not about going back, and it's not about staying where you are. He says things like, we go from faith to faith. We go from glory to glory. Like, it is transformational. There's constantly another step. And so for us, I want to see us go from reaching more people to reaching even more people, from seeing more people get saved to even more people getting saved, from generous to more generous. I want us to always be progressing and scaling forward and bigger in what we're doing. And so this year, we do have 2 things that we wanted to talk about that we are doing new this year that I'm really, really excited about, and our team is excited about, and I think that they're going to be really really good for our church community just moving forward. But the first one is online church. We are going to be launching online church. Speaking of which, hello to all of our Revelry friends and family that are watching via YouTube, Facebook,
MySpace.
Not
MySpace.
You weirdo. So we got some of that money that we brought in last year we used to buy some video equipment, and in 2020, today's the first day that we're actually putting something up, but we've just been messing around and working with video stuff so that way we can actually start bringing church to people's homes as opposed to trying to get them to leave their homes and come to church. Honestly, yeah, I think that online church is more of the future than I probably even want it to be, but it's just the reality.
Yeah. And it's not like a replacement for church, obviously, but like realistically, whenever you like say you're not a believer or you don't follow Jesus, you don't go to a church, like you're way more likely to check out someone's website or Facebook or YouTube and just like get a feel for what they do or what they believe in before you're ever going to like walk in the doors. So like church online is kind of the new front door to churches. And honestly, I really think it's going to be so helpful for people that are like maybe a little bit more introverted and a little bit skeptical to just maybe watch a couple services and be like, okay, I can hang with this weird dude with the Yeezys on. Okay, I can like come in, meet some people, maybe sit in the back at first, but maybe come towards the front. And that's really like without online church, they probably would never walk in. So. Right.
Or just, I mean, think about this. Part of the call of the church is to take the gospel to the ends of the earth. Now, Paul and the guys in the first century, they did that really well, but things were different back then. They didn't even know that North America existed. So, like, nowadays we do know that, but plane tickets aren't cheap. You know, it is cheap. It's free to have a YouTube account. It's free to live stream on Facebook. Consider the idea that there could be people in Indonesia this year that have access and are blessed to have access to the internet that could give their lives to Jesus because we're willing to just put our service out there for anybody who wants to log in. Also, I think it's so cool for like our college community. We have a great college community. Like your parents at home who wish they could be at church with you on Sunday, now they can be from their home. Or when you guys go home, you don't have to stop going to church. You don't have to not be a part of our community anymore. You can literally just get together with some friends and family and sit in your living room and watch our service from there. So I think it's a great way to reach people. Gen Z, okay, which is like the next generation, they spend so much time on YouTube, it's ridiculous. Like, video content is the future of the internet, and so we want to be able to start doing that so that way we can put Jesus everywhere. And, 9 times out of 10, it might be difficult to get somebody to come with you into church. It's not that difficult to send somebody a link to a YouTube video and be like, hey, you should check this out. I think you'd like it, and this is my church or whatever it is. So I'm really excited about that and just seeing what kind of growth can come from that because not only will we grow by reaching people who actually come on Sunday, but now we'll grow by reaching people just passively throughout the week, like that are just on YouTube and they type in a word and we just happen to have that word attached to our video. And so we pop up and they get to hear about the grace of God. So I'm really excited about Church Online. Sam's really excited about it.
Very excited. Also,
are you guys excited about it? Anybody excited?
Side note on that. So, and that's part of how we want to like increase all of our reach online, like through social media, through all these things. And honestly, if you are a creative person, if you really like videography, you like photography, you like writing, you like taking notes, come talk to me because we need a bigger team of people to help reach more people online. So if you were like, I'm looking at Autumn in the front row, I'm just saying, we already talked, but I definitely want to grow this team a lot more so that we can reach a lot more people online. So hit me up.
Yeah, definitely. And with that, another thing that we're launching in March 1st is Revelry 101. Okay, so what Revelry 101 is it's basically it is a class that is 2 parts, 2 different Sundays, the first and third Sunday of every month moving forward. It is a class for first-time guests or for people who want to know more about our church, for people who want to get plugged in. We provide lunch, all that kind of stuff. And you're going to be in there with people like Brandon and Holly. And basically, you get to learn more about who we are as a church. You get to learn more about what we believe as a church. You get to learn more about the vision behind our church. And it's also designed so that way you get to learn more about how God has designed you specifically. You get to learn about the strengths and the talents that he's given you. You get to learn about maybe some of the call that's on your life. I believe that each and every one of us is called to be a leader, and don't let that intimidate you. There's nothing intimidating about leadership. Leadership is simply the ability to influence somebody in any way, shape, or form, whether positively or negatively. I believe the church is called to influence the world, lead the world in a positive way and in a big way, and part of this class is to equip you and show you how God has designed you to be able to do that. And so think of this as kind of like the on-ramp to like team at Revelry. If you want to maybe serve, you want to get more plugged in, you can do that. We have this couple that, a few months ago, because we've been doing like this soft launch with our team that already exists. We've done a couple of these classes just to work through the material, make it as good as possible, so that way when we, launch it here in March, it'll be like the best that we could do right off the bat for people. But so we've been doing it with our team, but we did invite a couple that goes to our church who was checking us out, trying to decide, is this our home? We invited them to the class, and they came to the class, and they just sent an email to Holly this past week saying about how that class sealed the deal for them. That going to Revelry 101 was so good, such a good experience. They learned so much. They got to know more of our heartbeat. They got to know more about how God's designed them and everything, that they said, that's it, we're all in, we're never leaving, we're here to stay. And so now you can't leave because I just told everybody you said that. But no, like for real, they said it was really awesome, really amazing. They now serve in our kids. And so you guys, I would encourage any of you, even if you don't serve anywhere or whatever, like if you've been a part of our church for any amount of time, I would highly, highly, highly encourage you to sign up online this week and sign up for March 1st will be the first class, and do it. Just commit. There is no you don't have to do anything afterwards. Like, if anything, you just went to a class and learned some stuff. There's no pressure whatsoever. But we're not going to ask you to, sign up for anything or pay us money or anything like that. It's not weird. It's just we just want you to get to know who we are. You can also think of it as kind of like a new members class, even though we don't really have members. It's just whoever's here is here. But yeah, you just learn everything about us. It's a proven system because we stole it from other churches and then just manipulated it to fit our who we are and stuff. So changed the logo, came up with the genius name, Revelry 101, this guy. But anyway.
It's great, and I did the class already, and it's really awesome because I've been serving for a long time, but serving really it is. Not to brag or anything.
No, I stole your water.
Okay,
that's why they're laughing.
I thought they were laughing because I'm bragging. I'm not. But serving seriously is one of the greatest decisions I've ever made because I've grown more in community and made way more friends after serving. So if you have talents and maybe you don't have any idea what your talents are and you don't know how you could possibly serve at the church, come to the class and just learn about that because you'll learn about your personality and all these different things. But yeah, it's super great.
Yeah, it's amazing. So really excited about that. March 1st, that launches. Is anybody excited about that maybe? Yeah, a couple of you? You're like, yes, it's amazing. Yeah, don't do that. No, I still want this. What's yours is mine, babe. Okay.
Empty.
What's yours is mine, and what's mine is mine.
French fries.
But yeah, so really, here's the deal. Bye, babe. Love you. Hate to see you go, but I love to watch you walk away. Okay, anyway. Here's kind of my thoughts going into this year. I'm not going to preach a real long message. If you are new here, this is a completely unorthodox Sunday for us. We never do anything like this. It's normally pretty much I come out, try to tell jokes, then talk about the Bible, and then we sing songs. Like, that's a normal Sunday experience. This one's a little bit different because we're just celebrating 1 year. But I do want to talk for a few moments just about kind of, I think, where we're headed this year, and kind of show how the story of Jesus fits into that. And so last year, as the first year of our church, I really felt as if it was a season for us. I believe that God has created life to happen in seasons, right? We have winter, which we're in right now. We got spring, we got summer, we have fall, and they each have a part to play in the ecosystem of the world and how things run. And I think that life and church and everything is like that. You know, we all go through seasons. And I think that last year as a whole for our church was really this season of planting. It was a planting season, quite literally, because we planted a church. But I think it was a season all about just planting seeds. And then coming alongside those seeds that we planted and kind of watering them, figuring out, like, okay, now that we've planted this community, now that we're seeing this community grow, how do we maximize it? How do we just, really give it some nutrition? How do we nourish it and see it, come full to life? And now that we've kind of had that planting and that watering season, I really, I believe that we're moving into this second year, like, a big theme for this year that as I was praying, at the beginning of this year, just talking with God and had a couple weeks off. Brandon was preaching because he's great and I love him. I really felt like now it's time to move into a season of growth. And not growth for growth's sake, but growth for all the reasons we were talking about before, so that way we can make a bigger impact for Jesus. And I really felt like God laid a number on my heart. And so I'm going to share it with you all for kind of, this is our goal. This is what, as a community, we want to work towards seeing this realized. And I believe that God spoke to my heart and said, this year in 2020, we want to grow and we want to reach 250 regular attendees on a Sunday morning here at Revelry Church. Now, that sounds like a lot. That's over double what we normally see come in on a Sunday. But there's this promise that God has given us. And it is that He is the God who is able, to Him who is able to do exceedingly abundantly above all we ask or think, according to the power that works within us. So here's what that tells me. If I'm going into this year, and if we can all rally around this idea and say, okay, 250 people, let's reach 250 people, 250 people. If we can all ask for that, if we can all believe for that, if we can all think about that and say that's going to happen, if we'll all put in the work because He does things through the power at work within us, what that means is that He is able then to do exceedingly abundantly above 250 people. How crazy would it be if He grew our church in such a way that it wasn't 250 people one time on a Sunday, but it was 250 people multiple times on a Sunday who were coming in because they need to be in this space. They need to be in this place. But then that led me down a different trail, which is really, just my own personal life this year as I've been going through some struggles and things. Like, I've really just been like, what is the purpose? What is the point? What am I doing? What are we doing? What is it? What's happening? What is Christianity? What is life? Oh my God. Like one of those kind of seasons, And it's like a quarter life crisis. And they're like, and here's kind of where I've come back to. Why does anybody need to be here? Why does anybody need to be here? Because here's what the world that we live in now has realized. Nobody needs church. Oh, what? No, literally, nobody needs church. I never have to go to church again for the rest of my life, and probably nothing would change. But I felt like God led me to this story that's in the book of Acts, and basically what's happened is this guy named Paul, he's had a crazy conversion. He used to be named Saul. He basically persecuted the church. He stood by and watched Christians be murdered and signed off on it like he approved of the murder of Christians simply because they were talking about this Jesus guy and they had left the way of religion behind and they had been pursuing this relationship with Jesus. And so he persecutes the church. One day he's on the way to persecute the church more, and he has a literal encounter with Jesus. He's knocked off his donkey. He is made to be blind for 3 days. He talks with a Christian. The Christian prays for him and baptizes him because Saul decides he wants to give his life to this Jesus who he had been persecuting. Whenever he comes out of the water, the scales fall off his eyes. He can see clearly now because the rain is gone. And he gives the rest of his life to preaching the gospel. Like, he's like, I got to make this church, like, this is it. We got to build churches. We got to plant churches everywhere. And when I came to this story, it's in Acts 13, and it's the first time that Paul ever preaches a message like in a public way on his missionary journeys. It's his first one. Him and his buddy Barnabas, we'll call him Barney, they come to this city called Antioch, and they go to the synagogue on Saturday, which was basically Jewish church. Okay, they used to do it on Saturdays in the synagogue, and when they get there, Paul, he had a name amongst Judaism, and so they're like, oh my gosh, Paul's here, we gotta get him to preach. Bro, preach for us. And he's like, oh yeah, of course I'll preach, watch out. And he gets up on stage and he starts talking about the Old Testament, and he goes all the way to the Old Testament, and he brings it to present day, and he begins to tell the people about Jesus, the one whom was crucified, the one who was buried, and the one whom he had encountered, very much so still alive, on the road to Damascus. And he's telling them about Jesus. He's expounding the gospel, and he comes to this place, and this is what he says in Acts 13, verse 39. He says, in him, and by him, rather, that is Jesus, everyone who believes is, actually, can we go back to the previous verse? Do we have that one? 38? Maybe not? No? Okay. And by him, everyone who believes, verse 38 says that in him is preached to you the forgiveness of sins. And by him, everyone who believes is justified from all things from which you could not be justified by the law of Moses. Oh, okay. All right, we'll start over. Here we go. Happy birthday to me. Therefore, all right, we're in the zone. Here we go. Paul's preaching climactic conclusion. He says, therefore, let it be known to you, brethren and sisterin, that through this man is preached to you the forgiveness of sins. And by him, everyone who believes is justified from all things from which you could not be justified by the law of Moses. Beware, therefore, lest what has been spoken in the prophets come upon you. Behold, you despisers, marvel and perish, for I work a work in your days. I think there should have been a more verse to that one for sure. There's definitely more verse there. Where is it? Okay, so it says, good thing I read the Bible. It says, behold, you despisers, marvel and perish, for I will work a work in your days that you would not believe, even if someone told it to you. That's how the whole verse says. A work which you will by no means believe, though one were to declare it to you. Next part. So when the Jews went out of the synagogue, so Paul, that's how he preaches. He comes to, the altar call of his message. He says, in Jesus is preached the forgiveness of sins and a way for you to have a relationship with God that's completely apart from religion. It's not based on you being worthy of it. It's not based on you being able to work good, hard enough for it, be good enough, clean yourself up. No, it's just in Jesus you can have a relationship with God and your sins completely and totally forgiven. And so give your life to Jesus is basically what he says. And then it goes on and says, so when the Jews went out of the synagogue, the Gentiles, now a little context, in the first century the world was split into two types of people. The Jews, which are Jewish, and then the Gentiles, which are anybody and everybody who is not an Israelite. They are not from Israel. They are not Jewish. They are not the chosen people of God. And in Jewish theology, a Gentile was a term for somebody who is far away from God. Okay? Bad people, sinners, pagans. They're without God in this world. And so the Jews, they left the synagogue. Like, what's this guy talking about? Jesus, forgiveness, relationship, right with God apart from works. That's weird. That doesn't make any sense. But the people who were far away from God came up to Paul and they begged. They begged him. Imagine if whenever I got done preaching, somebody came up to me and started begging me to preach the exact same message again the next week. Because that's what happened to Paul. It was so good, that message of forgiveness and that message of relationship with God. It was so good that they said, yo, you have got to tell us that same exact thing next week. Go on, next verse. It says, now when the congregation had broken up, many of the Jews and the devout proselytes, a.k.a. converts to Judaism, followed Paul and Barnabas, who speaking to them, persuaded them to continue in the grace of God. Next verse. On the next Sabbath, almost the whole city came together to hear the word of God. And so I'm praying about where are we going this year, and I feel like God, gives me this number and we want to reach these people, and then it's like, okay, God, but like, how do we do that? What kind of a marketing campaign do we need? What kind of a scheme do we need to come up with? Like, what billboards do we put places? What catchy thing do we put on the market? Like, what do we do? How do we get people to come? And he led me here to this passage. Because Paul preaches a message. And by the way, the message is not that you can be forgiven of sins and be justified. He said, in him is preached the forgiveness of sins. And by him is a justification that cannot come through religion and rule keeping. The message that Paul preached was a message about Jesus. I don't want to get up on stage and just preach about you can be forgiven. I don't want to get up on stage and just preach about God loves you and you can be right with him. I want to get up on this stage each and every single Sunday, and I want to preach a message about Jesus, because it's in Jesus that you can find forgiveness. It's in Jesus that you can be restored to relationship with God. It's in Jesus that the grace of God, the goodness of God, the love of God, the mercy of God is revealed. So Paul preaches a message about Jesus, and the next week, Luke says almost the whole city came to the synagogue. Listen, the city is not a Jewish city. There is some Jews that live in the city, and they have church on Saturday. They're the religious people. They're the ones who have relationship with God. Everybody else in the city are people who are drug addicts, people who are sex addicts, people who are far away from God, people who do not want anything to do with God, have never even heard the name of God. And yet the next week, because they preached a message about Jesus, almost the entire city gathered in that space. Guess what didn't happen the week following up to that crazy church service where almost everybody came? Guess what didn't happen? Nobody that heard Paul talk the previous week was talking that week about, man, have you guys seen the new synagogue in town? It's really cool. Seems pretty edgy. Might check it out. Nobody was like, hey man, you should come to my synagogue this week because my synagogue is better than all the other synagogues. You should come to my synagogue this week because my priest at the synagogue is really funny and looks cool, so you should come there. Nobody was like, hey, you should come to the synagogue because this past week we just had some really good community. I just have a lot of friends there and you should come. No, the reason why people, the entire city came to the synagogue had nothing to do with the synagogue. Had nothing to do with the branding of the synagogue. Had nothing to do with the servant leaders of the synagogue. Had nothing to do with anything at the synagogue. It didn't even have to do with the fact that Paul was so cool or such a good preacher. What it had to do with was Gentiles went out that week and they were at their workplaces and they were maybe even in everything's weird for me this week. Why? What's going on? I went to that, that synagogue. I went there this past Saturday because I just didn't have anything better to do, and I happened to be awake, so I just went. And there was a guy there, and he started talking about a man whose name was Jesus, I don't know what it was. It was something about that name, Jesus, that had this weight lifted off of me every time he said the name Jesus. And he talked about how Jesus came and he was a friend of sinners. And how Jesus came and he didn't demand that people add up. He didn't demand that people be good enough. He didn't demand that you work hard enough. He didn't say you have to become Jewish you have to become religious. You have to take on the law of Moses. But he talked about this man, Jesus, who he said willingly gave his life so that way me and apparently you could have our sins forgiven. I don't even know what sin means, man, but that sounded so good. And he said that it's through Jesus that we can have the forgiveness of sins. He said it's through Jesus we could be right with God. It has nothing to do with our works. It has nothing to do with our religion. He said it was just all about Jesus. And that doesn't even make any sense because I've never heard anything like that before. But it was so crazy. I told him, hey, man, you got to talk about that again next week. So I'm going this Saturday because I think he's going to be talking about it again. You got to hear it for yourself, man. I don't know the Bible. I can't tell you a verse that he quoted. I don't know anything about it. All I know is that this week has been different because my soul feels lighter. I feel closer to God, and I haven't changed anything. We're here committing idolatry right now, and yet something is different. And actually, this doesn't even appeal to me anymore because there was something about that Paul dude preaching about a guy, a Jewish carpenter who was 33 years old, who did nothing but heal people, who did nothing but forgive people, who did nothing but meet people right where they were at and not demand that they get better, but got in their mess with them and loved them where they were and brought them out of that place of despair, brought them out of the place of darkness and gave his life so that they could be free. You want to know how we're going to grow this year? It's not because Revelry is amazing. It's not because we're going to promote Revelry or Nick or Brandon or anything like that. We're going to grow this year because we're going to be all about one name. The name above every other name. The name at which every knee shall bow and every tongue confess. We're going to be about Jesus this year. I want people to think about Revelry and think that's the place that is all about Jesus. And they say he loves me. And they say he's for me. And they say I don't have to be good enough for him, but I could just come to him and receive all that he has for me. So come on, church. Let's stand to our feet. Let's sing what we know to be true about Jesus today.
Well, thanks again for listening. To hear more messages like this one, make sure to subscribe and check out past episodes. If you like what you're hearing, consider rating it and even sharing it with friends. It helps so much. For more content from Revelry and to connect with us, go to revelrychurch.com.